Hey guys, I'm Logan Freeman, and this is the LiveFree Investors podcast. I interview investors and business owners who share investment advice so you too can live free. Today, I'm talking with Joel Goldberg. Joel, in a few sentences, tell us who you are and what you do.
Well, I think in a few sentences, Logan, and thanks for having me. I'm a longtime broadcaster, 12 years Royals baseball, waiting on a 13th season, hopefully soon.
Yep.
But with 25 years in the business, including football and other sports, what I learned in recent years was that there's so many lessons learned in sports in terms of culture, teamwork, and leadership that translate into the business and the real world, what I call it. And I share those messages with audiences, whether it be speaking or podcasts.
Yeah, if you had to name one, Joel, because I'm a guy that loves to read book summaries and things like that, like summarize something for me. What are 1 to 2 points that you would say that correlate back from the baseball or just athletics in general into the business world? Like, what is one of your central themes that you speak about?
Needing to connect with everyone.
Yep.
And you know this from your football and your athletic background. There never has been a locker room that has all the same type of person. And
Right.
whether that be in terms of diversity and background of where people came from, what they look like, what their culture is, or whether it just be different types of people. You name me one office that has all extroverts or all introverts or
Yep.
all everybody with the same exact beliefs. And so I think one of the great lessons with the teams that are successful or the ones that fail is that ability. They call it chemistry. It's not tangible. I think it's real. I think it applies in the sports world, and I think it applies in the business world.
I love that. And speaking from my athletic experience with collegiate football and a little bit afterwards, we had guys from California, guys from Texas. We had guys from, young guys, old guys. We had Mormons, we had Christians, we had everything. And you're coming together and you're working towards a central goal and theme. And I'll tell you what, man, people always ask me, so do you miss football? And what I tell them is I say, I miss the teamwork that we had moving towards a common goal. That was incredible to see all those people coming together, working towards that. So I can only imagine that message it lands very well in the office.
Yeah, and if you just look, baseball, you got guys from the Dominican, you got guys from Venezuela, who, by the way, sometimes can be lumped together as all the Spanish-speaking guys, but they come from different cultures. You look at guys, again, that grew up in a rural area or guys that grew up in a city, guys that were in California and Florida playing year-round, guys that were playing 3 sports in the Midwest. And in football, I look back at a team that I covered, the St. Louis Rams, way back when, that had an absurd amount of future Hall of Famers on it. And you look at a Kurt Warner growing up in Iowa, you look at a Marshall Faulk growing up in the projects of New Orleans. I visited with his mom in the house that he grew up in at one point.
Wow.
You look at Orlando Pace growing up in Sandusky, Ohio, Torrey Holt down in North Carolina. You're talking about a lot of backgrounds, and then you got to have someone on top that, one, that puts it together, and then 2, the coach, the leader, that figures out how to get the best out of everybody.
Absolutely.
It's truly unique.
Yeah, it totally is. Thank you for that, Joel. So I have to ask you, what's the best thing that you can think of being a business owner?
I think a little bit of the freedom with it. When I'm, and I'll keep relating things back to your sports world, and we don't need to. I'm sure it's the same for you as me. Not everything needs to relate back to sports, but I look at it like being a player on a team. You're within the structure of that team, that coach, that organization. And I think that when you're that business owner, whether it be my speaking, whether it be my podcast, I could say yes, I could say no. I can make those decisions based on what I think are best. I can also make those decisions based on money. They shouldn't always be based on that either. But I think there's a freedom to it and a personal responsibility in terms of time management, in terms of just what makes sense on an everyday basis. And that's a challenge. That's at times something that can be very stressful. But I think that it's a really good challenge to have too, and I think there's a certain autonomy to it.
Absolutely. Control. I always go back to control. I'm in control. And in that, like you said, there's 2 sides of that. You have to take extreme ownership for the failures that you do have or the success that you don't get. But it's so rewarding whenever you do have some success, you do have some wins that you can say, I did that. I directed that. And it feels really good. So there's a lot of stuff going on in our in our world today. So, and I always love to ask people this. I've got some great responses to help me continue to stay up with current trends and opportunities, but that can be a challenge. So keeping up with those trends, those opportunities, what's going on in the world is somewhat difficult. I'm curious, with you being in the media world, like, how do you stay up to date on everything?
Oh man, it's a great question, because in staying up to date on things, it could also be quite a time suck.
Yeah,
So, I find it very interesting. Some of it's generational in terms of what social media we use. I'm actually always very envious of the people that say, yeah, I really, I don't need to be on that. I'm not on it. And maybe I could be better with that, or at least on a vacation. I'm not capable of. It's something I need to
sure.
work on. But I mean, between Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, that's just four of the big ones for me. I'm missing a couple too. I find for myself, I find most of my information from Twitter, which I want to be careful about saying, because you have to then have your own personal filter to sift through what's real, what's not. But I can get links to articles and the things that I'm interested in, business and sports wise. And then, LinkedIn to me is just such a great tool for business.
Yeah,
And so that's to me the way that I connect. And I just, I think probably Instagram's a little bit more of the fun side of
sure.
things.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and that's good to be able to do that. So I try to use all of them. And I think that the old days of reading all the articles and all of that, I don't go searching for them, because I know they're going to populate in my feeds, and I'm going to go
Absolutely.
about it that way. But I
Yeah.
think just trying to stay informed, and then hopefully not getting sucked into the rabbit hole of all the comments and all the crazy stuff out there.
Sure, sure. We're all still waiting for your TikTok account to jump up there.
Yeah, you and everyone else. I did one that my kids roped me into during the pandemic. I mean, I danced whatever the heck they told me to do, and I don't dance, and I'm probably never going to be a TikToker, if that is the word. I guess that's, I'm not an okay boomer type, but that's about as close as I get to saying okay boomer, or being one of I'm not a boomer, but as a Gen Xer, I'm not sure that there's a place for me in TikTok.
Yeah, well, I don't think there's a place for me in it either. So I don't blame you. All right.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. So what's the best advice that you've ever received as a business owner?
Oh man, so many. And I think that this is, one that's been talked about a million times, but just doing for others before you do for yourself.
Sure.
And, and that comes with a responsibility to yourself of not being taken advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll just use this example. I mean, when this whole pandemic started, which was right around about the third week of March,
Yeah.
middle of March, third week of March. And, within a matter of days, I found out that baseball was going to be postponed. I think they said 2 weeks at first. And at that point I said, there's no way it's going to, there's no way it's going to be 2 weeks.
Right.
I didn't think it'll be 3+ months, but as a guy that gets paid by the game, I knew that I was going to be out a lot of salary. And,
Sure.
at this point, if I'm lucky, I'm going to miss out on half my salary for the year. I bring that up not as feel sorry for me, but just, it took me a few days to remember that and start saying with my speaking business, and even creating another podcast that was hopefully connecting people and helping people share their messages, that there is a way to take care of others when you need help even. And when you go out there and you do that, it's not really a reciprocity or a karma thing. It just, no one can put their finger on it. It just works out. It's treating people the way you want to be treated.
Yep. That is so important, man. I mean, it reminds me of the old golden rule, right? It's just it's important to remember. I mean, I built a business on relationships. So
Yeah.
This is your opportunity. This is a social show similar to yours, but this is your opportunity to promote somebody on the show. So what other successful business owner, person in your network should be on the LiveFree Investor podcast to share their message?
Oh man, there's so many, and people that I have met along the way with really cool stories. I mean, I started this daily video podcast during the pandemic to go along with my weekly podcast. And I think I've done 50 something plus, coming up on 60 episodes right now. I mean, I really love what just some of the charitable, or if not charitable, just the big heart type of things. I interviewed a guy named Ezekiel Crozier, Purple Heart recipient, medically retired, wasn't expected to be able to do a whole lot physically and in terms of life. And he started a nonprofit called Handicapping. It's called Handicapping. Basically what happened is, out of frustration, and he was getting upset, he was at a campsite or something one day and just started banging a bunch of bottle caps and realized he could make this unbelievable art. And he's now taking his situation and raising money, whether it be for veterans or other causes, with this incredible art. That's one. Had Bob Kendrick of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum on recently. I've had him on a million. I don't know that there's a guy that I've had on my regular baseball job pregame show more in 12 years than Bob.
Yeah.
Great, the best storyteller that I know in the United States. And certainly there's a lot going on in this world in terms of social injustice, but I just love the fact that the museum represents and shows all of that history, the good, the bad, and everything in between. I could go on and on. I love what the guys at Jay Rieger and Company did, Andy Rieger, thinking that they built this beautiful facility and they're cranking out whiskey and gin and their distillery, and they've got this amazing, entertainment spot for multiple events, and suddenly they're out of that business.
Right.
And they pivot to making hand sanitizer, not just for me and you, that's where the lines were initially, but for medical facilities and all of that.
How cool that was.
Chase McAnulty, Charlie Hustle, they couldn't make t-shirts, they started doing masks. So that's just 4 of them off the top of my head. And there's so many. I mean, I think that's what makes the world go round, though, Logan, that the stories and storytelling never gets old.
Right.
There's so many of them. That's just the first few that come off the top of my head.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I might lean on you for some introductions to a few of those guys. I would love to have all of them on. So I really appreciate that. Mm-hmm. This is the most important question of the podcast that I did not prep you for, but it's pretty simple. I think I might know the answer, but it's my brand, what I built on. It's my last name. My dad was a Native American, African American, and our last name is legitimately Freeman, So at some point we obviously were not. But I'd love to understand how you live free on a regular basis.
That's an unbelievable question. And in some ways, I guess I've thought about that a little bit. First off, I think most of us realize that we do live in this country. We've got the right to be able to have a type of freedom that we don't have around the world. But I want to dig a little bit deeper on this because, we're hearing this term white privilege so much. And what I've come to realize in the last few weeks is someone that was raised to always treat everyone equally. And I did, but I don't know that it's not that I was hiding behind anything, but I think by doing the right things, I didn't realize still what I was missing.
Sure.
I wasn't saying, hey, pat me on the back, I treat everybody equally, but I felt comfortable where I was at. Yet I was always uncomfortable with having discussions, say, about race. So you want to talk about being free, I think I kept myself captive from having those discussions. There are a lot of discussions I won't have in terms of politics and things that make no sense for me going on the air and pushing aside, say, half of a fan base. But to me, what I have realized is that I grew up as someone with not just freedom, but with privilege that others perhaps of a different skin color didn't have.
Right.
And so now what I feel and the freedom that I feel, just the way things are going right now, I feel empowered to speak up. And so if others are saying that silence makes you complicit, I don't know that that's what's pushing me there, but what's pushing me now is a greater understanding. And I think that's true of you. Getting back to your question too about, keys to business and all of that, walking in someone else's shoes. When you talk about being in a relational business, walking in someone else's shoes will always enable you to have a better relationship.
Absolutely.
So my goal now is to better understand and walk in the shoes of those that didn't have the same privilege of me. If that enables me to speak up because I have a voice in what I do, then that's what I'm gonna do. And getting back to, I got to focus on baseball when I'm on the air. No one's telling me don't talk about race, but I've got this opportunity now to come on to a show like yours or to do my show and say, when I feel the need to speak up, I'm going to do that. To me, that's part of freedom. To me, that's part of freeing.
Man, that is very timely and some true wisdom there. Joel, how can we find you? What's the best way to reach out, follow you? Let's point people in your direction.
Yeah, I think, certainly look for me on LinkedIn, and it's so easy to send those messages. And you'll find me if you put in Joel Goldberg on there. I've got all the social media stuff. And then my website, joelgoldbergmedia.com. And so you can reach out through the website too. I'm easy to find, when you're on all these different social media platforms, but joelgoldbergmedia.com, LinkedIn, and certainly I'm on Twitter as @GoldbergKC, and Instagram. I don't know why I didn't make these the same at Joel Goldberg KC. So I'm all over. I'm all over the place.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely link to those, man. I really appreciate it. Guys, this is Logan Freeman with the LiveFree Investors podcast, where investors and business owners share advice so you too can live free. For more insights and ideas on how you can live free, connect and message with myself and Joel today on LinkedIn. Joel, thanks for joining us today.
Logan, thanks for having me.
Until next time, guys, live free.